So, I need advice. Or maybe I just need to get this off my chest because I have no idea what to do next. I just got back from Colombia. 6 weeks of adventure, excitement, and well, mistakes. I thought I had it all figured out. I was going to walk back into my life, back into Rick's arms, and we'd patch things up. I knew he was mad when I first told him about the open relationship thing, but I figured he'd cool down. I mean, I wasn't the one who wanted space in the first place. I was just making the best of it. Anyway, I landed late last night, exhausted but relieved. I had it all planned: surprise Rick at our hotel, apologize, maybe even spin a little story about how much I missed him. He always melted when I looked at him a certain way. I was ready to smooth things over, tell him what he wanted to hear, and move on. But from the moment I stepped into the Ambassador Hotel, things started going wrong. First, my credit card got declined at check-in. Confused, I tried my backup card. Declined again. The front desk clerk gave me that polite but judgmental look, and I felt my face heat up. "That's weird," I said, forcing a laugh. Maybe my husband froze the account while I was traveling. I pulled out my phone to call Rick, but my phone had no service. I thought it was just a bad signal, but when I connected to the hotel Wi-Fi, I realized I wasn't even getting texts. My phone was completely cut off. Now, I was panicking a little. I tried to log into our bank account to check, but my password wasn't working. I requested a reset, email not found. What the hell? That's when a man walked up to me. Not Rick. Some stranger. He looked at me like he knew exactly who I was. "You Marcy?" he asked. I hesitated. "Yes." He handed me a manila envelope. From Rick. I took it with a shaky hand, and before I could ask anything, the man turned and walked out. I felt sick. I knew before I even opened it that something was wrong. Really, really wrong. I ripped it open right there in the lobby. Inside was a letter. A long one. The first line made my stomach drop. "You wanted an open relationship, Marcy. Well, now you have one, with the entire world." I skimmed ahead, my breath catching in my throat. He wasn't just mad. He had done something. He emptied our accounts. Sold our house. Sold our cars. Cancelled my phone. Told my job everything. Told my friends. Told my family. And, oh God, he had proof. I felt my knees weaken. The clerk was still watching me, so I forced myself to stand tall, shoved the envelope into my bag, and marched outside like I had everything under control. But I didn't. I had nothing. And I had no idea what to do next. I barely made it outside before my legs gave out, sinking onto the curb as the city buzzed around me, oblivious to the fact that my entire life had just been set on fire. My hands were shaking as I pulled the letter back out, forcing myself to read through it properly this time. Rick had written every word with the kind of cold precision I never thought he was capable of. He knew. He knew everything. And he hadn't just left me, he had erased me. Our bank accounts? Emptied and closed. The house? Sold. My car? Gone. My phone? Cancelled. My job? Probably lost, considering he sent proof of my affair straight to my boss. And as if that wasn't enough, he had made sure everyone, our friends, our families, my colleagues, knew exactly what I had done. My work trip excuse didn't hold up so well now, not with emails and photos from a private investigator floating around. I could already imagine the messages waiting for me if my phone actually worked. People I had laughed with, spent holidays with, confided in, now they all knew what I had done. I squeezed my eyes shut, trying to think, trying to breathe, but my mind wouldn't stop spinning. He had planned this. He had sat on this information, quietly gathering proof, setting everything up just right so that the second I stepped back into my old life, it would already be gone. And the worst part? I never saw it coming. I thought Rick would be angry, sure, but I figured he'd sulk, maybe threaten to leave, and eventually we'd talk it out. He wasn't supposed to do something like this. He wasn't supposed to be this ruthless. My fingers dug into the envelope, searching for anything that could save me, and all I found was a single $500 Visa gift card. That was it. That was all I had left. Rick had stripped me of everything and left me with just enough to survive, for a few days, maybe a week if I stretched it. The message was clear: I wanted freedom. I got it. Now, I was truly on my own. I fumbled for my phone, trying his number even though I already knew what would happen. This number is no longer in service. I tried logging into our bank account, but my password didn't work. I tried resetting it, but my email wasn't recognized. When I called customer service, they couldn't even find my name in the system. That's when it hit me, Rick hadn't just taken everything. He had wiped me out of existence. I sat there on the curb, staring blankly at the pavement as people walked past, completely unaware that just a few hours ago, I thought I still had a home to return to. Now? I had nowhere to go, no money, no way to contact anyone, and no clue what to do next. For the first time, I understood what it felt like to be truly alone. I don't know how long I sat there. 5 minutes? An hour? Time felt meaningless when everything I built had just vanished. People walked past without a second glance, cars honked in the distance, the city carried on like nothing had changed. But for me, everything had. I forced myself to stand, gripping the envelope like it might somehow undo the damage if I held on tight enough. It didn't. My credit cards were useless. My phone was a brick. I had $500 and whatever scraps of dignity I could salvage. And I needed a plan. First, I had to find somewhere to stay. I wasn't about to blow my only money on a luxury hotel, so I searched for something cheaper, a motel, an Airbnb, even a friend's couch. But the second I thought about calling anyone, I froze. Who would pick up? Everyone knew. Rick made sure of that. My best friend Melissa? She was one of the people I had confided in about Trey. If she hadn't already sent me a nasty message, she was probably debating whether she wanted to bother. My co-workers? They'd seen the emails. My family? God, I didn't even want to think about that yet. I couldn't go to Trey. That was the one thing I knew for sure. That would just prove Rick right, and besides, Trey was never a real option. He was fun. A fantasy. Not someone I actually saw a future with. And even if I wanted to, what was I supposed to do? Show up at his doorstep with nothing but an envelope full of my own downfall? No. I wasn't that desperate. Not yet. I finally settled on a cheap motel a few blocks away, the kind where no one asks questions and the carpet smells like cigarette smoke. The walk there felt surreal, like I was floating outside of my own body, watching my life collapse from a distance. When I reached the front desk, I slid the gift card across the counter like some shameful offering, half expecting it to be declined too. But it worked. One night paid for, and just like that, I had a place to exist, at least until morning. Inside the room, I sank onto the bed and pulled out my phone again. Maybe I had service now. Maybe this was all a mistake. Maybe. Still nothing. No calls. No texts. Rick had really done it. He had cut me off completely. I needed to eat, but the thought of stepping outside again made my stomach twist. Instead, I just sat there, staring at the ceiling, replaying everything in my head. 6 weeks ago, I left thinking I had control. That I could step outside my marriage, have my fun, and come back to my life untouched. That Rick would be waiting, that we'd work through things, that I'd have the final say. But I didn't. Rick had the final say. And he made sure I had nowhere left to turn. I barely slept. Every time I closed my eyes, the letter replayed in my head like some sick joke, each line cutting deeper. I had spent years thinking Rick was weak, that he was the type to roll over and take whatever I threw at him. But he wasn't weak. He was patient. And patience is way more dangerous than rage. He didn't just leave me, he made sure I had nothing left when he did. Morning light seeped through the dusty motel curtains, and reality hit me all over again. I was still here. Still alone. Still broke. My stomach twisted with hunger, but I ignored it. I had to figure out my next move. I powered on my laptop, praying Rick hadn't touched it. I could still access my email, but the inbox was already flooded with subject lines that made my heart pound. Disappointed in you. You should be ashamed. What the hell, Marcy? I couldn't bring myself to open them. I scrolled past names I used to rely on, knowing whatever was inside wouldn't help me. Then I saw an email from my boss. Effective immediately, we are launching an internal review regarding your conduct. You are placed on unpaid suspension pending further investigation. I felt sick. Rick really did send everything to my job. I thought maybe, just maybe, they wouldn't care that it was my personal life, but apparently they did. Maybe it was because Trey was involved, Maybe it was just the embarrassment of it all, but either way, I wasn't getting a paycheck anytime soon. I slammed the laptop shut and buried my face in my hands. No money. No home. No job. I needed someone, anyone, to throw me a lifeline. Against my better judgment, I tried Melissa. She picked up on the third ring, but the second she heard my voice, her tone turned ice cold. "Wow," she said. "You actually have the nerve to call me." I swallowed hard. "Melissa, No," she snapped. "I don't want to hear it. You lied to me, Marcy. I defended you. I told people you weren't cheating, that Rick was just being paranoid. And then I get those emails? Do you have any idea how stupid that made me look?" I didn't think. "Yeah, that's the problem," she cut in. "You never think. You just do whatever you want and assume people will clean up after you." I opened my mouth, but no words came. She was right. I had expected that. She let out a bitter laugh. "Guess what, Marcy? No one's cleaning up your mess this time." And then she hung up. I stared at the phone, heart pounding, fingers numb. Rick hadn't just taken my money. He had taken my reputation. And without that, I had nothing. I was truly on my own. I sat there, gripping my phone, staring at the blank screen like I could will it into ringing. But no one was going to call. No one was going to help me. Melissa was just the first. The second I reached out to anyone else, I knew I'd get the same response: anger, disgust, maybe even a few laughs at my expense. Rick had made sure of that. I needed air. The motel room felt suffocating, like the walls were closing in, so I grabbed my bag and stepped outside. The morning rush was in full swing, people heading to work, grabbing coffee, living their normal, stable lives. I used to be one of them. Now I was just some woman in yesterday's clothes, standing outside a cheap motel with nothing but a $500 gift card and the weight of my own mistakes. I wandered into a nearby diner, sat in a corner booth, and ordered the cheapest thing on the menu: black coffee and toast. My hands were still shaking when I reached for my phone again. There was one last person I could try. I typed out a message. "Trey, call me. It's important." I hesitated, then hit send. Minutes passed. I forced down a few bites of toast, my stomach knotting up with every second of silence. Then, finally, my phone vibrated. "Trey." I exhaled sharply and answered. "Trey." "Marcy." His voice was cautious, like he already knew something was wrong. "What's going on?" I hesitated. How much could I tell him? How much should I tell him? Trey was fun, but he wasn't dependable. He was the guy I ran to when I wanted to feel good, not the guy who fixed things. But right now, he was the only one who hadn't shut me out. "I need help," I admitted. "Rick," he found out. And he ruined everything. Trey was quiet for a moment. "What do you mean?" I swallowed hard. "He took everything. Our money, the house, my job. He told everyone about us." Another pause. Longer this time. Then finally, damn. That was it. Just damn. Like I had lost a bet, not my entire life. I gripped the phone tighter. "Trey, I don't know what to do. I have nowhere to go. I just need a place to stay for a few days until I figure things out." He sighed. "Marcy, look. I didn't think Rick would go that far. But I can't, this isn't my problem." I blinked. "What?" "I mean, it's your marriage," he said, his tone shifting. "I didn't tell you to leave him. I didn't tell you to get caught." My chest tightened. "Trey, please. I just need a couple nights." Look, I gotta go," he cut in. "I hope you figure things out." Then he hung up. I sat there, the diner noise blurring into the background. Trey was supposed to be my escape. My backup plan. But the second things got messy, he ran. Rick had taken my old life. Trey had slammed the door on whatever I thought I had left. And now, I was really out of options. I stared at my phone long after Trey hung up, half expecting him to call back and say he was just messing with me. But he didn't. He wasn't going to. He had gotten what he wanted: fun, excitement, zero responsibility. Now that things had gone south, I wasn't his problem anymore. I let out a slow breath, forcing myself to stay calm. Panicking wouldn't fix this. I needed a plan. The problem was, I had none. I had no home, no money, no job, and no one willing to help me. Every number in my phone was just a reminder of another burned bridge. I thought about trying my parents, but the idea made my stomach turn. My mother would listen just long enough to make me feel like garbage, and my father? He'd probably tell me I got what I deserved. No, that wasn't an option. The reality of my situation hit me in full force. I had been so sure I could talk my way out of this, so confident I could smooth things over and get Rick back under my thumb. But I had underestimated him. He wasn't sulking. He wasn't begging for me to come home. He had made sure there was no home to come back to. I barely touched my food, just sat there with my coffee growing cold. I needed money. That was my biggest problem. If I had cash, I could at least get a place to stay longer than a night. Maybe even get a new phone, try to reach someone before Rick's damage completely set in. I thought about selling my laptop, but I'd get next to nothing for it. Jewelry? I had a couple nice pieces, but they were sentimental, gifts from Rick that I had kept despite everything. I could try a pawn shop, but the idea of walking into one, admitting I was desperate, made my stomach churn. The only other option was the gift card. I still had around $480 left, but that wouldn't last long. I had to be smart. I pulled up a bus schedule on my laptop, scanning the destinations. Staying here wasn't an option. Too many people knew me, too many chances of running into someone who had read Rick's email. Maybe I could get to another city, start fresh, at least by myself some time. But where? No job, no degree that would get me anything quick, no real skills besides talking my way into and out of things, which clearly wasn't working anymore. My fingers hovered over the keyboard, but no destination felt right. I wasn't running to anything. I was just running away. And I had no idea where to go. I sat there, staring at the list of bus routes, but the names of the cities blurred together. It didn't matter where I went. I had no plan, no future, no safety net. I had always thought, no matter what, I'd land on my feet. That I was too smart to ever end up in a situation like this. But here I was, alone in a cheap motel, with nothing but a prepaid gift card and a lifetime of burned bridges. I needed money. Fast. But how? No job, no credit cards, no bank account. I could try to get hired somewhere, but even that wasn't a guarantee, not with my name being dragged through the mud. Rick hadn't just taken everything, he had branded me. If anyone searched my name online, they'd see the emails, the accusations, maybe even the photos. Who would hire me now? I gritted my teeth and closed the laptop. I had to take control of something, anything. The pawn shop was my best bet. I didn't want to do it, but pride wouldn't feed me. I dug through my bag, pulling out the few pieces of jewelry I had, 2 gold bracelets, a diamond necklace Rick had given me for our anniversary, and a pair of earrings that weren't worth much but might get me a meal. I hesitated at the necklace, running my fingers over the chain. It had been one of my favorite gifts. Back when Rick was still the man who adored me, before everything fell apart. I shoved it into my bag. No room for sentimentality now. The pawn shop wasn't far, just a few blocks from the motel. The walk felt surreal. Just days ago, I was sipping cocktails in Colombia, laughing carefree. Now, I was avoiding eye contact with strangers, feeling the weight of every step. When I walked in, the man behind the counter barely glanced at me. "What do you got?" I placed the jewelry on the counter, trying to keep my voice steady. "Looking to sell." He picked up the necklace first, inspecting it under the light. "Real?" "Yes," I said quickly. He smirked. "I'll be the judge of that." I clenched my fists as he examined each piece, checking the gold, the stones. Minutes passed in silence, my stomach twisting. Finally, he leaned back. "Best I can do is $400 for all of it." I stared at him. "That necklace alone is worth triple that." He shrugged. "Not here, it's not." I wanted to argue, but I had no leverage. No proof. No other options. I could walk out, but then what? Try another shop, waste more time, risk running into someone who knew me? I was already scraping the bottom. "Fine," I muttered. "Deal." He counted out the cash, sliding it across the counter. I took it, shoving it into my pocket before I could second-guess myself. $800. That's what I had now. A small fortune for someone who had nothing. But even as I walked out, money clutched in my shaking hands, the truth settled deep in my gut. This wasn't enough. Not even close. I walked out of the pawn shop with $800 in my pocket, but it didn't feel like a win. It felt like a countdown. Money was slipping through my fingers before I even had a real plan, and no matter how I stretched it, it wouldn't last long. The motel was $60 a night. Food, transportation, every little expense was just another way for this cash to disappear. I could last maybe 2 weeks if I was careful, but then what? A job? Doing what? I didn't even have a phone, let alone a reference. I sat on a bench outside a gas station, staring at the passing cars, my mind running in circles. This was it. This was the real consequence of everything I had done. I wasn't just in trouble, I was nobody. No connections, no resources, no lifelines. And worst of all, Rick wasn't coming back. I had spent so much time believing I could fix things, that I could spin the right story, say the right words, and smooth everything over. But Rick had made sure there was no fixing this. He hadn't left a single crack for me to slip through. I felt my throat tighten, but I forced the emotion down. No time to break down. I needed a plan. The first step was a new phone. I walked to the nearest convenience store and bought a cheap prepaid one. Nothing fancy, just enough to make calls and access the internet. $50 gone, just like that. I winced but reminded myself that I couldn't afford to be unreachable. The next step was a place to go. I couldn't stay in the motel forever. I needed something longer term, something cheaper. A roommate situation, maybe? A sublet? I started scrolling through listings, but everything required a deposit, a credit check, or at least someone willing to vouch for me. I had none of that. I rubbed my forehead, fighting the rising panic. There had to be something. A shelter? A shared rental where they didn't ask questions? Then, as I scrolled, an idea hit me. I could leave. Not just to another city, but to another state. Rick had ruined me here. But if I got far enough away, maybe I could start fresh before his reach caught up to me. I pulled up the bus schedule again, my mind racing. A new place meant new opportunities, a chance to disappear before my reputation followed me. Maybe I could get a waitressing job, something under the table, something where no one cared who I was. It wasn't a great plan. It wasn't even a good plan. But it was the only one I had left. The more I thought about it, the more it made sense. I couldn't fix what Rick had done, not here, not in a city where my name was already ruined. But somewhere else? Somewhere new? Maybe I could get ahead of this before it swallowed me completely. I walked back to the motel, gripping the plastic bag with my new burner phone like it was my last shred of control. As soon as I got inside, I locked the door, sat on the bed, and started searching for bus tickets. Prices weren't terrible if I kept it simple. A long-haul bus ride out of state, no frills, no stops in any major cities where someone might recognize me. I had about $750 left, enough to get far enough away that maybe, just maybe, I could rebuild before the weight of Rick's revenge caught up to me. I hesitated before buying the ticket. Once I left, that was it. No turning back, no second chances. Everything I had built here, my job, my marriage, my friendships, was already in flames. But running meant accepting that there was nothing left to salvage. I swallowed hard. I had no choice. I bought the ticket. It left in 6 hours. That gave me just enough time to pack up what little I had left, grab some food, and disappear before anyone could decide to track me down just to see the wreckage up close. I shoved everything into my bag, double-checked that I had my cash, and stepped outside, the air thick with the weight of what I was about to do. My hands were shaking as I texted one last person, just to see if I had any chance at saving even a single relationship. Melissa, I know you're mad. I deserve that. But please, I just need to know, do I have anyone left? I waited. 1 minute. 2. 5. 3 little dots appeared. Then they vanished. I stared at the screen, my heart sinking. That was my answer. No one was coming for me. No one was on my side. I was officially on my own. I tightened my grip on my bag and started walking. I had a bus to catch. The bus station was grimy, the kind of place where people kept their heads down and minded their own business. It was perfect. No one here cared who I was, what I had done, or how I ended up with nothing but a backpack and a prepaid phone. I bought a water bottle from a vending machine, then sank into one of the plastic chairs near my boarding gate. The bus wouldn't leave for another 30 minutes. Just enough time to sit with my thoughts, even though I wanted to shut them off completely. Rick's letter still haunted me. No matter how much I tried to block it out, I could hear his words, cold and deliberate. He hadn't yelled. He hadn't begged. He had simply erased me, as if our entire life together had been nothing but a transaction he could close out with a signature. I had always thought he was too soft, too forgiving. I had counted on that. But now? Now I realized he wasn't weak. He had just been waiting for the perfect moment to strike. And when he did, he made sure I had no way to crawl back. I glanced at my phone. No missed calls. No texts. Melissa wasn't going to respond. No one was. I was starting over, whether I wanted to or not. The intercom crackled, announcing my bus was ready for boarding. My fingers tightened around the strap of my bag as I stood. One last look at the city I had called home. One last silent goodbye to the life I thought I could fix. Then I stepped onto the bus, leaving everything behind. The bus smelled like stale air and cheap fabric, the seats worn down from years of strangers passing through. I found an empty spot near the back, slid in by the window, and pulled my bag close. This was it. My escape. My second chance. But as the bus rumbled to life and pulled out of the station, a cold realization settled over me. I wasn't running toward anything. I was just running. The city lights blurred past, fading into the dark stretches of highway. I tried to sleep, but every time I closed my eyes, Rick's letter burned in my mind. I imagined him somewhere out there, driving with the windows down, music blasting, free in a way I had never expected him to be. He wasn't sitting around heartbroken, waiting for me to come back. He had made his decision. He had erased me, and he wasn't looking back. I reached for my phone out of habit, but there was nothing to check. No messages. No notifications. No lifelines. I had always been able to talk my way out of things. If I got caught in a lie, I found a way to twist it. If someone got mad, I smoothed things over. But Rick had closed every door before I even knew they were locked. For the first time in my life, I had no one to manipulate. No safety net. No backup plan. Just miles of road ahead and the sinking knowledge that I was completely, utterly alone. The bus rolled through the night, the highway stretching endlessly ahead, dotted only by the occasional glow of gas stations and rest stops. The hum of the engine, the rhythmic bounce of the road, it should have been soothing. Instead, it felt like a countdown. Every mile put more distance between me and the wreckage I left behind, but it didn't feel like freedom. It felt like exile. I stared out the window, watching the reflection of my own face in the glass. I looked tired. Hollow. Nothing like the confident, carefree woman who had boarded a plane to Colombia 6 weeks ago. That version of me had believed she had everything under control. She thought she could make her own rules, take what she wanted, and come back to the same life she had always known. But that woman was gone, stripped down to nothing, and the person left behind had no idea who she was anymore. I shifted in my seat, pulling my jacket tighter around me. Sleep wasn't happening. My mind wouldn't let me rest. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw the emails. The bank notifications. The look of betrayal I imagined on Rick's face as he planned his revenge in silence, waiting for the perfect moment to pull the rug out from under me. I had underestimated him. That thought kept circling in my head, over and over. I had spent years thinking Rick was passive, that he would always be the guy who let things slide, who would rather keep the peace than take action. I counted on that. I built my choices around it. But I had miscalculated. Rick hadn't just left me, he had buried me. And the worst part? He didn't even need to scream, threaten, or fight. He just acted. Quiet, methodical, devastating. He had planned every move so precisely that by the time I realized what was happening, it was already over. I pulled out my phone, scrolling mindlessly through the same empty notifications. Part of me wanted to call him. Just to hear his voice, just to know if there was any part of him that still felt something for me. But I already knew the answer. Rick wasn't coming back. He wasn't waiting by the phone, wondering if I'd apologize. He had made sure I had nothing left to come back to. I clenched the phone in my hand, my throat tightening. For the first time since I had read that letter, I felt something other than shock. I felt anger. Not at Rick. At myself. I had been so sure I was in control. I thought I had power over him, over my choices, over everything. I thought I could make mistakes and smooth them over, that I could lie my way into the life I wanted. But in the end, I had played myself. And now? Now I had nothing but a prepaid phone, a dwindling pile of cash, and a one-way ticket to nowhere. I forced myself to breathe, gripping my bag tighter. Fine. Rick wanted to erase me? Let him. But I wasn't going to disappear completely. Somewhere, somehow, I would find a way to start over. A way to rebuild. A way to make something out of the mess I had made. I didn't know where this bus would take me. I didn't know what would happen next. But one thing was certain. I wasn't done yet. Morning crept in slowly, pale gray light filtering through the scratched-up bus windows. I must have drifted off at some point because my neck ached from the way I had slumped against the seat, but the exhaustion clung to me like a second skin. Sleep didn't bring rest, just fragmented thoughts, half-dreams where I was still back home, only to wake up and remember home didn't exist anymore. The bus pulled into a rest stop, one of those generic ones with a fast food joint, a gas station, and a handful of tired travelers stretching their legs. The driver announced a 20-minute break, and I hesitated before standing. I wasn't hungry, but I needed to move. I needed to remind myself I was still a person, not just some ghost floating through the remains of my old life. I stepped out into the cool morning air, my bag slung over one shoulder. The smell of coffee and gasoline mixed in the air, and for a second, I just stood there, watching the people around me. A mom wrestling with a cranky toddler. A trucker smoking a cigarette, staring off into the distance like he was trying to forget something. A young couple laughing softly over their breakfast, leaning into each other like they were the only two people in the world. They all had somewhere to go. Something to return to. I had nothing. I walked into the gas station, mostly to kill time, and grabbed a cheap granola bar and a bottle of water. The cashier didn't even look at me as he rang me up. I paid in cash. Every dollar I spent made my stomach tighten, a reminder that my supply was dwindling fast. When I walked back outside, I felt my phone buzz in my pocket. For a split second, my heart leapt. Someone had texted me. Someone hadn't abandoned me. But when I pulled the phone out, the number was unfamiliar. Unknown. You thought you could just run? I froze. My fingers clenched around the phone, pulse hammering in my ears. Who the hell was this? I hadn't told anyone where I was going. Even I barely knew. I swallowed hard, glancing around the rest stop like I'd spot someone watching me. But there were only strangers, people who had no idea who I was or what I had done. My thumbs hovered over the keyboard before I finally typed a response. Me, who is this? A minute passed. Then another. My skin prickled with anxiety. Then finally, 3 dots appeared. Unknown, you really think you got away clean? A shiver ran down my spine. This wasn't just some random wrong number. Someone knew. I shoved the phone back into my pocket and took a deep breath. Maybe it was a prank. Maybe it was someone from work, pissed off about the emails. Maybe, God forbid, Rick had given my number to someone just to mess with me. Or maybe it was worse. I had convinced myself that Rick's revenge ended when he emptied our accounts and sent that letter. That he was done with me. But what if he wasn't? What if this was just the beginning? I forced myself to move to get back on the bus, but my mind was racing. Whoever had sent that message wasn't finished with me yet. And now, I wasn't just running from my past. I was running from whoever was still watching. I slid back into my seat near the back of the bus, gripping my phone so tightly my knuckles turned white. The air felt heavier now, my pulse hammering in my ears as I stared at the screen. That message wasn't random. It wasn't some wrong number or a sick joke. Someone out there knew exactly what had happened to me. And worse, they wanted me to know they knew. I forced myself to take slow, even breaths. Panicking wouldn't fix anything. I needed to think. Could it be Rick? No, that didn't fit. If he wanted to gloat, he would have done it in that letter. Rick didn't play games. He hit you all at once, like a tidal wave, and then disappeared. Whoever this was. They wanted to drag it out. My stomach twisted. Maybe Trey? He had cut me off the second I asked for help, but I wouldn't put it past him to be bitter that his little escape from reality had come crashing down. Maybe he was pissed that his name was getting dragged into my mess. But Trey wasn't exactly the type to follow through on things. He liked easy fun, zero consequences. The moment things got too real, he bailed. So who the hell was texting me? I glanced around the bus, my skin crawling. The other passengers were either dozing off or staring at their phones. No one was paying me any attention. Still, I felt like I was being watched. The bus rumbled back onto the highway, and I forced myself to refocus. I needed to be smart. First things first, I had to figure out how they got my number. My old phone had been shut off when Rick canceled our plan, so I had picked up this prepaid burner myself. There was no way someone could have linked it to me, unless they had been tracking me from the start. My stomach churned. Could Rick have installed something on my laptop before he cut me off? Some kind of spyware? Maybe when I connected to Wi-Fi, it had sent my location out to someone. The thought made my skin crawl. I pulled out my phone and forced myself to text back. Me, who is this? What do you want? Seconds ticked by. I stared at the screen, my breath shallow. Then the dots appeared. Unknown, you don't get to just disappear, Marcy. I swallowed hard. Me, what do you want? A pause. Unknown, you'll see soon. A cold shiver ran down my spine. I shut off my phone and shoved it deep into my bag, as if that would somehow make the messages disappear. My hands were shaking, my mind racing through every possible scenario. Someone was coming for me. Maybe to gloat, maybe to punish, maybe just to watch me suffer. I thought I had lost everything. Now, I was starting to think I hadn't lost enough. Because someone out there still had more to take from me. And I had no idea how far they were willing to go. The bus rumbled down the highway, but I barely noticed. The world outside blurred into nothing, just streaks of trees and road signs, all meaningless compared to the storm in my head. Someone was out there, watching, waiting, playing with me like a cat batting around a wounded bird. I had no idea who they were. No idea what they wanted. But they knew me. They knew what I'd done. They knew I was running. And worst of all, they knew exactly how to get inside my head. I kept my phone off, but it didn't help. The words were burned into my brain. You don't get to just disappear, Marcy. You'll see soon. Every possible scenario spun through my mind, each worse than the last. Maybe it was Trey, pissed that I had ruined his reputation. Maybe it was Melissa, pretending to cut me off while secretly watching me drown. Maybe it was someone from work, someone Rick had sent my emails to, someone who wanted me to pay for embarrassing them by association. Or maybe it was Rick himself. No, that didn't make sense. Rick wouldn't waste his time with cryptic messages. He had already won. He had burned my life to the ground and walked away without looking back. No, this was someone else. Someone who wasn't done with me. I hugged my bag to my chest, gripping the straps so tight my fingers ached. The bus was quiet, passengers either asleep or lost in their own worlds. But I felt exposed. Like any second, someone would turn their head and smirk, letting me know the game wasn't over. I forced myself to breathe. Think. Maybe I was overreacting. Maybe the messages were just empty threats, just someone trying to scare me. But if that were true, how did they find me? My number was brand new. My location was unknown. Unless. I swallowed hard, slowly reaching for my laptop. The thought had been gnawing at me ever since I got that text. What if Rick left something behind? He had access to all my accounts before he cut me off. He had time. He had the intelligence. If he wanted to plant something, some kind of tracking software, he could have done it before he vanished. My heart pounded as I powered on the laptop. The screen glowed softly in the dim bus lighting, casting shadows over my hands. I hesitated, then clicked through my settings, searching for anything that felt off. My fingers trembled as I dug deeper. Hidden apps. Background processes I didn't recognize. Files I hadn't downloaded. And then I saw it. A program, buried beneath layers of system files, disguised under a generic name. Installed exactly 6 weeks ago. Right before I left for Colombia. The air in my lungs turned to ice. Rick hadn't just erased me. He had been watching me the entire time. I had thought I was in control. That I was playing the game, making my own rules. But the truth was so much worse. Rick had never lost control. And now, even after everything, he still wasn't done with me. My fingers hovered over the keyboard, my breath coming in shallow gasps. The tracking program sat there, buried in my laptop like a parasite, silently feeding Rick every move I made. He knew where I was. He had always known. The messages weren't from some coworker. Not from Trey. Not from Melissa. They were from him. My stomach clenched as I thought back to his letter. How calm he had been, how precise. He hadn't just taken my money, my home, my reputation. He had taken my privacy. While I had been sitting in this bus, thinking I was escaping, thinking I was slipping away before his revenge could finish swallowing me whole, he had been sitting back and watching. He knew I was running. And he wanted me to know that he knew. I forced myself to think, to move. My hands were shaking as I navigated through the files, deleting the program as fast as I could. But even as it vanished from my screen, I knew it was too late. He had already gotten what he needed. And then, as if to confirm my worst fear, my phone buzzed. I stared at it, my pulse hammering. Slowly, I picked it up. Unknown, there she is. Finally figured it out? I clenched my jaw, my skin crawling. My hands tightened into fists. He wanted me to panic. He wanted me to break down, to feel small. I refused. What do you want, Rick? A pause. Then. Unknown, I already got what I wanted. This is just the encore. A shudder ran through me, but I refused to let him win. He had destroyed my life, taken everything, and still, it wasn't enough for him. He wanted to see me suffer. I had played right into his hands, but now? Now I had a choice. I could keep running. Keep playing his game. Or I could stop. I stared at the bus window, my own reflection looking back at me. I had spent my entire life bending things to my will, twisting reality to fit my needs, believing I could talk my way out of anything. But Rick had done something I never expected. He had outplayed me. And I had two options: let him keep controlling me, or finally take control of myself. I turned my phone off, yanked the back cover open, and pulled out the SIM card. Without hesitating, I flicked it onto the bus floor and crushed it under my heel. Then I grabbed my laptop, powered it down, and shoved it deep into my bag. I didn't know where I was going. I didn't know who I'd become. But one thing was certain: Rick wasn't going to watch me anymore. He had won his revenge. But he wasn't going to win me. And with that, I leaned back, exhaled, and let the road take me forward. Wherever it led.